everybody doing? I have a big announcement that I'm making tomorrow, but tonight I wanted to show you how to make money with lease options, and I'm going to show you how I did that before I even knew what I was doing. Okay, this was my very first deal. I graduated from a boot camp on Valentine's Day, and on February 28th, I found myself sitting in a seller's kitchen. They had bought the house a year before, and in early February, their daughter had come home unexpectedly and she was pregnant. So they were under a severe time crunch to find a house that would be big enough for 4 people because they bought this house as their retirement home. They hadn't planned on raising a kid in this house. So they put the house up for sale for $135 on Zillow, of all places. And I found it listed that morning, so I called about lunchtime. I set up an appointment, and that afternoon, evening, after I got off work, I went and talked to them. All right, and this is what I told them. We're going to call this the Windsor house because it was on Windsor Drive or Windsor Road or Windsor something or another. All right, so this is the Windsor house. And they told me that they had been there for a couple months and that they had bought the house and they were making payments on it and they owed $122. Okay? And they were paying you read that? $800 a month. All right. So they owed $122. They were paying about $800 a month, and this was February 28th that I met these people, and I sat down in their kitchen with them and I talked to them. All right. So I told them that what I could do is I could do a lease option on it. I said I don't have $122,000 in my pocket, and honestly, I couldn't offer you that much even if I had it because I would need to have some holding costs and pay for the money and all that other stuff. I said, but what I can do is y'all can leave. You can go on, find another house. You can rent a house. You can go buy a house. You can do whatever it takes because their daughter had come home and she was pregnant. They needed a fast solution. I said, what I can do is I'll buy it for the $122 that you owe on it, and I'll start making these $800 a month payments in 3 months. All right, so you're, Mr. Seller, you're still going to make the payment in March, April, and May. I will make the payment in June. All right, so I don't know if you can tell the difference, but I agreed to pay $122 and $800 a month starting in June. Okay, sound good? And I told these people I couldn't give them any money, that the soonest I would be able to give them any money would be in June. But I would start making their payments in June. All right? So it's starting to rain. Y'all let me know if the internet dies on me. So anyway, this was my agreement. All right? So what I did was I told them also that day that they had to take the house back off Zillow because they'd had it up for $135 on the big Z. All right, so the next day on probably March the 1st, it was probably not a leap year, I put it on the big Z for $145. All right, and I had a couple out of Chicago who called and they were like, oh my gosh, we saw the house was $135 yesterday and today it's $145. What happened? And I said, well, I got it. I got it under contract. I bought the house, and now I'm selling it for $145. And they said, no, we love the house. We absolutely love the house. We'll be down next week. We want to look at it. Don't let anybody else have it before we get there. They were from Chicago. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I advertised it, and I put it on Craigslist, and I put it on Facebook, and I had a couple of people looking at it. So these people called, and they said, we'll be there on Thursday. We want to look at it. What time can we come and look at it? So I made an appointment to go look at it, and then I started advertising on Craigslist that I was having an open house. I thought if I was going to meet somebody there, I might as well meet everybody there, right? So I had 4 or 5 people say they were going to come, but only this couple showed up. All right, this couple from Chicago showed up. And when they showed up from Chicago, this was probably the next week. All right, so maybe even 2 weeks. Let's say it's March 15th. The couple from Chicago showed up, all right? And they said, you know what? Since you put the house up, we put our house up. And we're trying to sell our house so that we can move down to Tennessee and enjoy East Tennessee in the spring and summer. And I was like, okay, well, what's cool is I've got this thing under a lease option, so I could give you a lease option, all right? And since you did see the house at 135, I'll let you buy it for 135. And, you know, while you're trying to sell your house in Chicago, you could go ahead and move on down to this house in Tennessee and just pay me rent every month of like $1,000. How's that sound? And they were like, awesome, we'll do it. And I said, okay, but you know, I've got other people looking at it. I'm advertising it. I don't know what the Chicago market's like. I don't know how long that'll take. Let's do this lease option for a year, and surely your house in Chicago will sell by then. And they were like, absolutely. So I sold it to them for $135, $1,000 a month, and I gave them a year to cash me out. All right, so let's catch up there. So the Chicago people paid me $135 and $1,000 a month. And the day they met me, so that they had first dibs on this house, they gave me $3,000. Okay, so they gave me a total of $3,000 on March 15th, about March 15th. Okay, they gave me $3,000 that day. $2,000 of that was for rent to April 15th and May 15th. So they paid 2 months of rent in advance. All right, so 2 months equals $2,000. That left $1,000 going towards their purchase price of $135. Now they owe me $134. Okay? Everybody, does that make sense? Right? I mean, basic math. My first payment is in June, but they started renting it in March. They paid 2 months of rent in advance, so they paid from March 15th to April 15th, from April 15th to May 15th. That's 2 months, $2,000. They gave me $3,000, which left $1,000 to come off the purchase price of $135. Right? Everybody cool? Everybody good? Okay, so that's what we agreed to on March 15th. Well, don't you know that on March the 16th, the Chicago people called me and they were like, hey, we got a contract on our house in Chicago. We're supposed to close on it the 1st of May. We'll be closing on that house the middle of May. And I was like, yeah, but you got to have inspections and it's got to get appraised. And, you know, let's just keep this lease option intact so that we can, you know, make sure that everything flows the way it's supposed to. And in case you have to go through a couple different buyers or whatever, they were like, it's not going to be a problem. So on May 13th, the Chicago people, I mean, they started moving in like the next weekend. They got their house in Chicago under contract, and they started moving stuff to Dandridge like the next weekend. Okay, the first thing they moved in was a kayak, and I was there like to sign the paperwork for them, and they were like, "Yeah, let's sign this. We got to hit the lake before the sun goes down." And I was like, "Okay, let me just get out of your way." Okay, so they moved all their stuff from Chicago down to Dandridge. They'd already paid me 2 months rent in advance. I didn't have a payment due until June, so I got that $2,000 in my pocket. And then on May the 13th, I've got it printed out over there. I've actually got my first check framed. Do you want to see it? This is my first check, and this is the letter that I wrote Ron LeGrand to say, hey, this stuff works. And if you look right here, I got a check for $13,000 because even though I got, you know, the $3,000 up front and $1,000 of it went to the purchase price, I took it over for $122 or whatever they owed. All right, so they owed $121 by the time we closed, and I got the difference between what they owed and the $134 because this $1,000 had come off on May the 13th. So on May 13th, I got a check for $13,160 plus this $2,000. So I made $15,000. I made over $15,000 from February 28th to May the 13th. I got one big check of $13,000, and I got the $2,000 from the monthly rent when I didn't have a payment going out. So from the end of February to the middle of May, I made 15 grand on my very first deal. These sellers, I found them for free on Zillow. I went and talked to them. I made them an offer. They loved it. They had no problems. They had no questions. I mean, they had a ton of questions, but so did I, because I'd never done this before. But we figured it out together. And then the Chicago people showed up. And I had a short lease option with them. They could have gone for 12 months, and I would have made $200 a month because I had an $800 a month payment, and they were paying me $1,000 a month. So I would have made $200 a month. But I didn't, because they cashed out their house. They rented it until they could close on theirs. And on May the 13th, I made $15,000. I love lease options. I love lease options because if I had been a regular agent in this situation, I would have found out that they owed $122, and I would have listed the house. The people in Chicago probably would have found it on Zillow still. And even if I'd sold it to them for $135, which is what I sold them to for right here, what's 6% of $135? Was that like $7,000, $7,500? I'm not really good at math, but if this was 106%, that'd be 6,000. So maybe $8,000, maybe, if I'd been a regular agent. But I'm not a regular agent. I'm an investor, and I do lease options. So I made twice as much money being an investor and doing a lease option and helping these sellers and helping these buyers and not using my license. I made twice as much money. So when people ask me why I don't use my license, I have a license, but I don't use it. I make twice as much money by not using my license. People ask me all the time, do you need a license to buy houses? No. I make twice as much money not using my license than if I did use my license. All right, so here's the math one more time. I bought it for what they owed, $122, taking over their monthly payments of $800. I put it up on Zillow for $145, but these people had already seen it for $135. So I agreed to sell it to them for $135. I took off $10,000 because I'm not greedy. Took off $10,000 and let them buy it for $135. I made $2,000 because I rented it to them before I had a payment due, and then I got $13,000 at closing. And I know all the other coaches and the gurus and everybody else flashes their big checks, so here. $13,000 on May 13th. And I've done 57 of these since then. All right? Lease options work, and they're going to help your sellers, and you're going to love them. All right, Jason says it's time for dinner. I got a message, so I've got to go. Y'all have a good evening. We're having the Deal Makers Club tonight at 8, so if you're in First Deal Done Fast or you're in the Rockstar group, we're going to be live in First Deal Done Fast in about an hour to do the Deal Makers Club. So you still have about an hour to send me your lead sheets if you want us to go over them live in First Deal Done Fast at 8 Eastern. Bye, y'all. Let me know if you have any questions.